Hi, I'm Kathy Leahy of Cambium Wellness. I am here today with health educator Dr. Mache Seibel. He is a professor at the University of Massachusetts Medical School and founder of Health Rock. Dr. Seibel, welcome.
Thanks so much for having me, Kathy. Pleasure to be here.
We're delighted to have you. We'd like to talk today about women's issues, and there are a number of topics we'd like to cover. One of them is about bone health.
Well, let's talk a little about bone health because that's something that women need to start thinking about even when they're quite young. You know, a lot of times women don't realize that the calcium that's in their bones today actually is being laid down when they're teenagers. So most of the bones growth that happens is when we're getting taller, and that's when the body is taking in the majority of the calcium that it's ever going to get. So as a consequence, when young girls and boys are growing, that's the time they need to really be getting adequate amounts of calcium, because by the time you're finished with high school, you've already got about 80% of all the calcium you're ever going to get. By the time you're 30 years old, you're basically done with all the calcium you're going to get, and from that time on, it's your calcium savings account, and actually what you're going to do for the rest of your life is keep pulling out of your savings account, and if you don't have enough calcium, you're going to be at higher risk for osteoporosis, which is thinning of the bones, and hip fractures and things that happen when women get older. So when women are young, I think it's very important that, when I say young, I mean including childhood, that they get either plenty of milk products, or they're going to get, like yogurt or milk. About 30% of the population is lactose intolerant, but if that's the case, they can either take lactase pills and have milk, or there's Lactaid milk, or they can take a calcium supplement. Some way to get adequate amounts of calcium in their diet, eat calcium-rich foods, and of course, exercise is very good for building bones. So this is something that you really want to encourage too.
Wow, that is really interesting. I didn't realize, and I'm sure a lot of other women didn't, that we get our calcium before we're out of high school.
That's right.
That's huge.
And then as you get older, of course, you want to continue those supplements. And then as you get towards menopause, which is going to be a topic we'll talk about at another time, but in that window of time, it's particularly important to continue that calcium intake and to continue to exercise so that your bones stay strong. Because if you are a 50-year-old woman and you're healthy, your risk of dying of a broken hip or complication of osteoporosis is the same as your risk of dying of breast cancer. And it's imperative that you get a bone density at about the transition towards 45 or 50, just like you get mammograms started, because that's going to make sure that you are keeping your bone health strong.
Now you're talking about having a bone density, say you start at 45. I know with mammograms we have our baseline, and then we go either every year or, I go every year. Is that the same way you would handle bone density?
For bone densities, you can have it a little bit wider every 2 or 3 years, but it takes 2 points to make a line. So if you have one, it tells you where you are, but until you have the second one, you don't know if it's going down or it's going up or it's staying the same. So you have to have at least 2. And I would say in every other year, every third year, and a lot depends a little bit on your history. If you're a person who has a history of a bone fracture in your past, if you have a mom who has osteoporosis and is hunched over, as they have one of those dowager's humps, as they say, if you're somebody who has on certain medications that put you at risk, like if you're taking a steroid medication or an SSRI, a serotonin selective receptor uptake inhibitor, one of those antidepressants, SSRIs like Prozac or one of the other ones. If you are...
Let me interrupt. I didn't realize. So an antidepressant can deplete your calcium?
It can help, it can diminish your absorption of it, and also make sure and check your vitamin D, because vitamin D is an essential ingredient of getting the calcium that we eat from the intestines into the bloodstream and then putting it from the bloodstream into the bones.
So the vitamin D is important to take along with the calcium.
You should take along with it, but also make sure, particularly if you live in the Northeast, I would encourage getting a blood test for your vitamin D at that, at part of your annual exam, at least at some point, even if you're a young person. Because the vitamin D is not only building bones, it's also been shown to keep your muscles strong. It's important for heart health. It's been associated, low amounts of vitamin D have been associated with an increased risk of breast cancer. So there's so many parts of our bodies that vitamin D is essential for that it's important to make sure that you're getting enough.
One other question I have about this is that, is it possible, I know that we should take a vitamin calcium every day. Is it possible to take too much of the calcium supplement and vitamin D?
Well, that's a good question. In general, women want to take about 1,200 milligrams of calcium every day. You don't want to take it all at once. It's better to divide the doses because most people cannot absorb more than 600 milligrams of calcium at a time. So trying to take 1,200 milligrams at once isn't going to help.
Okay.
But also, if you're a person who is, let's say, at risk for kidney stones, then taking extra calcium can put you at a little more risk for a problem. So if that's the case, you might want to talk with your doctor. Also, if you're taking lots of calcium, one of the best ways to prevent kidney stones is to drink a lot of water, which is really good for your health anyway. So women should be drinking about 8 glasses of water a day to help with that and just getting fluid through their kidneys and keeping strong and healthy.
Wow. Speaking of drinking, 8 glasses of water a day and staying healthy, what about eating healthy and exercise for women?
Very important questions, and I think that eating is, of course, very important because that's the fuel that's going to keep our bodies growing. And I think that, as we talked about, one important ingredient is calcium and calcium-rich foods. A second important ingredient is making sure that people are getting plenty of vegetables. As a matter of fact, when you take your plate, if you were to design your ideal meal for your body, it may not be what you're thinking in terms of your taste, but when you're thinking in terms of your body, if you cut your plate into 4 corners, you want to have half of it full of vegetables. About 1/4 of it, about the size of your palm, is about the amount of protein you want, so whether it's chicken, fish, or beef. And then the other portion, the remaining fourth, would be some kind of a carbohydrate that would be like a pasta. And try and stick with the whole grains. Exercise is incredibly important because it's going to keep your bone health strong. It's going to make sure that you control your weight. It's going to then be beneficial in preventing the risk of diabetes, preventing the risk of high blood pressure, preventing the risk of osteoporosis, and a whole host of other things. And ideally, it's weight-bearing exercise. Weight-bearing meaning walking, running, jumping. But dancing is good. Gardening can be good. Anything.
Love those.
All of those things are really good for you and very important.
Now, what you're saying is the exercise and eating healthy are very important, but exercise doesn't have to just be going to the gym, the gardening, going out for walks with your friends. Just
not at all. They've done studies that show they've actually monitored people throughout the day, and if you're a person that's a working person, you sit in your cubicle and you don't get up at all during the day, you've got to avoid that. And ways you can do that is when you go to work, don't try and get the handicapped spot. Park at the other side of the parking lot.
Right.
Walk. When you get to work, walk up the 1 flight of steps.
Or the 4th.
Or the 4th. Hey, all the better. When you're sitting on the phone and talking, you don't have to have it always connected, or you don't have to just sit down. You can actually get up and move around. All of these activities, if you have a meeting with somebody, have a walking meeting. All of these kinds of things can be done so that you're not sedentary all day long, because inactivity isn't good. And actually, studies show that if you are active all day long, you will actually burn up as many calories as if you run to the gym and do your treadmill thing and then race back and be all stressed out. Before we leave your food, I want to say one last thing about that.
Please do.
If I could encourage people to just reduce what you eat down to a very simple thing, I would say eliminate as much bread as you can. I would say to try and limit sugar, and particularly the raw sugar. Try and get your sugar from fruits and from foods that are whole foods, as opposed to, Snickers and candy bars. If every once in a while everybody has this, gives in, but if it's something that you can focus on. And then the third thing is try to avoid saturated fats or trans fats.